Hey guys, it's Belle, and in this video I'm going to be reading through and commenting on a short 7th century text entitled the Origo Gentis Langobardorum, which means the origin of the Lombard people. So these are, of course, the Scandinavian barbarians who came into Italy after Justinian's reconquest of it in the 6th century and settled particularly the northern regions of Italy thereafter. And this is attested in two manuscripts, one of which has these rather charming illustrations from the scene that we are going to be reading very shortly. And part of the reason this text is extremely interesting is that it is some of the only Latin language literature written down during the Middle Ages concerning the Old Norse gods. We have Odin here and his wife Freya up here. And it's just very interesting to read this, particularly because the Lombards themselves probably wrote this quite soon after settling in Italy themselves. So this may be a sort of Latin fossilization of some rather old Lombard mythology. So, with that being said, let's get on and read it. One last historical tidbit I should note with this is that this text was quite influential in that it was used as a source by the Lombard historian Paul the Deacon when he would write his history of the Lombard people. So this is the original source of a lot of Lombard myth. So let's get on with it. Est insula qui dicitur Scandanon, quod interpretator exilia in partibus Aquilonis, ubi multe gentes habitant, inter quas erat gens parva quae vinilis vocabatur, which means there is an island which is called Scandan, insula qui dicitur Scandanon. Quod interpretator exilia means which is translated as ruin, exilia, in partibus Aquilonis, in parts of the north, ubi multe gentes habitant, where many tribes or people live. Inter quas erat gens parva, among whom there was a small tribe, quae vinilis vocabatur, which were called the Winiles. Et erat cum eis mulier nomine Gambara, abebatque duos filios, nomen uni Ibor et nomen altri Agio. Ipsi cum matre sua nomine Gambara principatum tenebant super Viniles. Now this is really interesting. Et erat cum eis mulier nomine Gambara. There was a woman with them called Gambara by name. Habebatque duos filios, and she was having two sons, or she had two sons. Nomen uni Ibor et nomen alteri Agio. One was called Ibo and the other was called Agio. Ipsi cum matre sua nomine Gambara. So these men with their mother, and they repeat what she's called again, Gambara, principatum tenebant super Viniles. They were holding the principality, or they were holding the princedom over the Viniles. So this is a girl boss, basically, ruling the Lombards before they enter into Italy, which is quite interesting. Moveran se ergo duces vandalorum, id est ambrietassi cum exercitus suo, et dicebant ad Viniles, aut solvite nobis tributa, aut preparate vos ad pugnam, et pugnate nobiscum. Which means, therefore the duces, the leaders of the Vandals, the Vandalorum. Now this is quite an interesting claim that we've got here. It's the leaders of the Vandals who are encountering them. So this, during the time period that this was being written, the Vandals had been occupying a kingdom in northern Africa. So this must be referring to a sort of mythological time very, very long ago, before the move from Scandinavia into southern Europe, at which point the Vandals would still be in northern Europe. So the leaders of the Vandals, which were Ambri and Assi, came cum exercitus suo with their army, et dicebant ad Viniles, and they said to the Viniles, aut solvite nobis tributa, either pay us tribute, aut preparate vos ad pugnam, or prepare yourselves for the fight, et pugnate nobiscum, and fight with us. So this is pretty standard kind of formula for how the petty kingdoms of this time period would work. People would approach the leaders and be like, you can either pay homage to our kingdom and give us financial monetary tribute, or we will invade and attack you. Tunc responderunt Ibor et Agio cum matre sua Gambara. Melius des nobis pugnam preparare, quam vandalis tributa persovere. Tunc ambrietasi hoc est duces vandalorum rogaverunt godan ut dare teis superviniles victoriam. So, Dunque responderunt Ibor et Agio cum matri sua Gambara. Then Ibo and Agio responded with their mother Gambara, Melius est nobis pugnam preparare. It is better for us to prepare the fight, or to prepare for the fight, quam vandalis tributa persovere, than to give tribute to the Vandals. Tunc Ambrianasi, hoc est duces Vandalorum, then Ambrianasi, these are the leaders of the Vandals. They feel a great need to repeat names in this text, don't they? They feel like we're going to forget it if they don't mention it every other sentence. Ambrianasi, the leaders of the Vandals, rogaverunt godan ut darvetes superviniles victoriam. They asked Godan, now, obviously, in terms of Lombard pagan mythology, we know rather little, but this is, of course, the Christian god. Now, the text doesn't explicitly say that Godan or Freya are gods. It's just that from, first of all, the etymological context of knowing that these are going to be Lombard versions of the names of Odin, and then his wife, who we'll meet later, is called Freya. We know that they are performing the role of gods, and then also within the text itself, the things that they do are pretty godlike, but the text doesn't use the word, deus, to describe these beings, Godan and Freya. So there is perhaps a degree of ambiguity which is being presented by this text, which might have meant it survived longer, rather than explicitly acknowledging that these were pagan deities, which could have been problematic in the case of monastic literature of the early Lombard period in Italy. Instead of doing that, the writer of this text may have decided to leave it ambiguous and just describe, Gotha and Freya as almost like these people who could be interpreted as gods, and they certainly function as gods because they have powers to grant victories which a human ruler wouldn't be able to. But they could also plausible deniability to say that we are not talking about gods in this case. An interesting side note about this also is that to some extent, there are degrees to which the Lombard language might be coming through. So we can see this, and we'll talk about this actually later, but we can see it here in rogaverunt godan, right? Because goda would be the sort of, presuming it's a masculine A stem, it would be the nominative, genitive, or dative form of this, given that only Gothic as a language preserves distinct genitive and dative forms in the singular for the weak masculine A stem nouns. So this shows a Lombard inflection with the godan rather than Latin godam, which we would expect, which is quite interesting to see here. So this sort of suggests that at the time this was being written, the speaker or the writer even of this text might have spoken Lombard, and perhaps even that this text itself was translated from a Lombard language original account, whether this is an oral historical account or some kind of early written text which has now been lost. And the reasons for it being lost would probably just be because texts which are written in languages which fell out of use are quite prone to be turned into palimpsests and rewritten with Latin texts because people in later centuries don't understand them and they don't feel the need to waste valuable parchment for words that they don't understand. So that's why. Anyway, the point is they are treating the names Gotha and Freya like Lombard language names, not like Latin loanwords into the Latin language, which is quite interesting and suggests that there may have been some kind of spoken Lombard around the time that this text was written. Moving on. So they ask Godan ut Darvetes super viniles victoriam, that Godon would give the Vandals victory over the Winiles. So, respondit Godon dicens, quos sole surgente ante videro ipsis dabo victoriam. Eo tempore cambarda cum duopus filis suis, id est Ibor et Agio, qui principes erant super viniles, rogaverunt fream uxorem Godam ut ad viniles esset propitia. So, responded Godon dicens, Goda responded, saying, quos sole surgente ante videro ipsis dabo victoriam. Those whom, with the sun rising, ante videro I shall see first, ipsis dabo victoriam, I shall give these the victory first. Eo tempore Gambara cum duobus filis suis, it is Ibor et Agio. At that time, Gambara with her two sons, that is Ibor and Agio, that's like the third time they've repeated their names, qui principes erant super Winiles, who were princes over the Winiles, rogaverunt Fream uxorem Godam. They asked Freya, the wife of Goda, ut ad Winiles esset propitia, that there may be sort of favour for the Winiles. It's interesting to note here that Godam seems to just have a single reflection. It's Godan for the nominative, accusative, genitive. So I may have been wrong in assuming that it was a masculine a stem, but in certain places it seems to be functioning that way. Freya seems to be declining to some extent more like a Latin word such as puella. Anyway, so the Vandals ask Odin, Godan, to give them victory over the Winiles, and then the Winiles themselves go to his wife. Tunc Freya dedit consilium, ut sole sorgente venirent Winiles et mulieres eorum crinis solute circa faciem in similitudinem barbe et cum viris suis venirent. Tunc luciscente sole, dum surgeret, giravit Freya usur Godan, lectum ubi recumbebat vir eus, et fecit faciem eus contra orientem, et excitavit eum. So, tunc Freya dedit consilium, then Freya gave to Gambara and Ibor and Agio this plan, ut sole sorgente venirent, that they should come with the sun rising, viniles et mulieres eorum, the Winiles men and their women, crines solute circa faciem. Now, this is actually kind of bad Latin, actually, because it should be a ablative absolute here, which the text is clearly able to do. We've got that above. So this would literally mean that the Winiles men should come, their women should come, and the loosed hairs, as in, yeah, literally the hair on their head let down out of a ponytail or out of a bun. So this is kind of weird Latin here, which might indicate that the writer is not an amazing Latin speaker, which is interesting. But anyway, so the Winiles and their women should come basically with their hair being released, circa faciem, around their face, in similitudinem barbe, in sort of imitation of a beard. Bear in mind this idea of simulating is a term which has been applied in Latin literature to, particularly to natal females cross-dressing as men in the past. So, for example, in the legend of Saint Eugenia in the Latin versions, in which Eugenia defends their cross-dressing at trial, Eugenia describes it as a similitudo or simulatio, a sort of simulation and imitation of the male gender role. And this is exactly the same sort of stem that's being used here, similitudinem. So we're getting some fun cross-dressing going on here, some gender bending in this story. So the Winiles and their women should come with their hair wrapped around their face in imitation of a beard. And this is the image from I believe, 1800s illustration of this story, which shows the women with their hair tied around their face to look like a beard. and they should come with their men. Tunc lucescente sole dum surgeret. Then, when he was getting up with the sun shining, giravit Freya. Freya turned, Godon's wife, so Freya, who was Godon's wife, giravit lectum, she turned the bed, ubi recumbebat vir eos, where her husband was reclining, et fecit faciem eos contra orientem, and she sort of turned his head towards the east, et excitavit eum, and she woke him up. Et ille aspiciens vidit viniles et mulieres ipsorum, abentis crinis solutas circa faciem et ait, qui sunt isti longi barbe, et dixit Freya ad Godon, sicut dedisti nomen da illis et victoriam. So, and that man looking at them, ille spiciens, vidit viniles et mulieres ipsorum, he saw the viniles and their women, habentes crinis solutas circa faciem, having hairs loosened around their face. Et ait, and he said, Qui sunt isti longi barbe? Who are these long-bearded ones? Or who are these people of the long beard, which is an interesting name for it. Et dixit Freya ad Godon, and Freya said to Godon, Sicut dedisti nomen, just as you gave them a name, da illis et victoriam, give them the victory also. Et dedit eis victoriam, ut ubi visum esset vindicarent se et victoriam haberent, ab illo tempore viniles Langobardi vocati sunt. Et dedit eis victoria means he gave them victory, ut ubi visum esset, so that when it was seen, vindicarent se et victoriam haberent, they would sort of vindicate themselves, they would prove themselves to be victorious, and they would have victory. And when visum esset, I assume this is referring to the sun or the battle. Ab illo tempore viniles Langobardi vocati sunt. So from that time on, the viniles were called the Lombards, because this text is, after all, the origin of the people of the Lombards, so now we know the origin of their name. Now, unfortunately, this is the part of the text that transitions from mythology into more history kind of stuff, and it's not the most exciting. It's more of a king list, but it means we can rush through it with relative speed. So I want to give you guys the full text rather than just the first chapter, because I might as well while we're here. Et moverunt se exinde Langobardi, et venerunt in Goledam, et postea possiderunt Aldonus Anteb, et Eneb seu et Berguneb, et dicitur quia fecerunt sibi regem nomine Agilmund, filium Agioni, ex genere Gugingus. Some weird names here. And the Lombards moved out of there, moverunt se exinde Langobardi, et venerunt in Goledam, and they came into Goleda, et postea possiderunt Aldonos Anteb et Enab seu et Burgundeb. So, and afterwards they possessed Aldonus, Anteb, Eneb, and Burgundy. I know what Burgundy is, I don't know what the rest of these places are. This ev, or this eb ending might be a sort of Lombard place name ending, whose meaning I'm honestly not sure about. Et dicitur quia fecerunt sibi regem nomine Agilmund, and he said that they made themselves a king by the name of Agilmund, filium Agioni, the son of Agio, ex genere Gugingus, from the line of Gugging, I suppose. What a weird name. But that's a point that I actually learned when I was reading this, because this is one of the very first medieval texts that I read in Latin back when I was learning. And it was the fact that they, in this period, to some extent, elect their kings from among the nobles. So we tend to have this image of the Middle Ages that the king was always a hereditary dynasty, and that was often the case, but particularly if they were without a clear dynastic heir, nobles would simply elect a king for the people. So, Now you know. So after him, Agilmund, et post ipsum regnavit Laemico ex genere Gugingus, et post ipsum regnavit Lethuc, et dicitur quia regnasset annos plus minus quadraginta, et post ipsum regnavit Aldehoc, filius Lethuc, et post ipsum regnavit Godehoc. This is really sort of simple stuff. And after him, regnavit Laemicho, so Laimic ruled after him, ex genere Guginus, from the line of Guging. Et post ipsum regnavit Lethuc, and after him Lethuc reigned, edicitur, and it is said, quia regnasset annos plus minus quadraginta, that he had ruled for more or less 40 years. Et post ipsum regnavit Aldehoc, and Aldehoc ruled after him, filius Lethuc, the son of Lethuc. Et post ipsum regnavit Godehoc, and Godehoc ruled after him. Nothing too dramatic there. So, illo tempore exhibit rex Audoacari de Ravenna cum exercitu Alanorum, et venit in Urgelandam, et impugnavit Urgos, et occidit Theovane regem Urgorum, secumque multos captivos duxit in Italiam. Tunc exierunt Langobardi de suis regionibus, et habitaverunt in Urgelanda annos aliquantos. So, illo tempore exhibit rex Audoacari de Ravenna. So in that time, King Odoacer, this is a very weird Latinization of a name which Roman authors often struggled to write, he exited de Ravenna, out of Ravenna, cum exercitu Alanorum, with an army of the Alans, I should say, et venit in Rugilandam, and Odoacer went into Rugiland, et impugnavit Rugos, and he fought the Rugs. I don't know what the proper term for them is, the Rugi. Et occidit Theovane regem Rugorum, and he killed Theuvane, the king of the Rugi. Secumque multos captivos duxit in Italiam, and he led many captives with him into Italy. Tunc exierunt Langobardi de suis regionibus, then the Lombards departed from their regions, et habitaverunt in Rugilanda annos aliquantos, and they lived in Rugiland for a few years. Post eum, and this must be after Godehoc. So after Godehoc, post eum regnavit Clapho, filius Godehoc, et post ipsum regnavit Tafo, filius Claphoni, sederum Langobardi in campis feld annos tres. Pugnavit Tato cum Rodolfo rege Erlorum, et occidit eum, tulit Vando ipsius et capsidem. Sorry for the bang in the background, I can't help it. Post eum herudi regnum non haberunt. So after him Clapho ruled, the son of Godehoc, et post ipsum regnavit Tato filius Claphoni, and Clapho's son Tato ruled after Clapho. Sederum Langobardi in campis feld annos tres. The Lombards sat in the fields in campis annos tres. Now this word feld here I think is just a Germanic word that's put in, sort of like the English field. And it's interesting that it's just like inserted there in the middle of the text, in the middle of the Latin matrix. Pugnavit Tato cum Rodolfo rege Herulorum et occidit eum. So Tato fought against King Rodolphus of the Heruli and killed him. Tulit Vando ipsius et capsidem. He took, now this word Vando I think is a another Germanic word, and I'm taking this to mean wand or like a scepter, so the scepter of his imperial rule, et capsidem, and the sort of crown. Post eum Heruli regnum non habuerunt. Afterwards the Heruli had no kingdom, so the Lombards conquered the Heruli in this act. Et occidit Vacho filius unicis Tatonem regem Barbanem sum cum Zuchilone. Et pugnavit Vacho, et pugnavit Ildichis filius Tatoni, et fugit Ildichis ad Gippidos, ubi mortus est, injuria vindicanda Gippidi scandalum commisserunt, cum Langobardis, eo tempore inclinavit Vacho suavos sub regno Langobardorum. So, Et orchid Wacho filios Unichis, and Wacho the son of Unich killed, and who did he kill? Tatonum bredim barbanem sum. He killed King Tato, his paternal uncle, cum Zuchilone, with the help of Zuchilo. Some really cool words in this section, I should say, some really cool names. Et pugnavit Wacho, and Wacho fought. Et pugnavit Illichis, and Hildichis fought, filios Tatoni, the son of Tato. Et fugit Ildichis ad Gippidos, we mortus est, and Hildicus fled to the Gippids, where he died. In Iuria vindicanda Gippidi scandalum commisserunt. So the Gippids lamented the injuries which must be vindicated, cum Langobardis, with the Lombards. So the Gippids who had been to whom I should say Ildicus fled, they lamented these injustices with the Lombards. Eo tempore inclinavit Wacho suavos sub reino Langobardorum. In this time, Wacho subjugated inclinavit, the suavos, these are the Suebi, sub reino Langobardorum, under the rule of the Lombards. So this is showing us how the Lombards are going out and they're conquering yet more areas. Wacho habuit uxores tres. Recundam filiam fisud reis Turingorum, et postea accepit uxorem Austrigusam filiam Gippidorum, et abuit Wacho de Austrigusa filias duas, nomen une Visigarda, quam traduit in matrimonium Theodeperti regis Francorum, et nomen secunde Valderada, quam abuit uxorem Scuswald rex Francorum, quam odio habens tradit ideam Garibald in uxorem. So, Wacho habrit uxores tres. So Wacho had 3 wives. Now this isn't simultaneously, this is one after the other. Recundam was the first one, filiam Fisud regis Turingorum, the daughter of King Fisud of the Turingi. Et postea accepit uxorem Austrigusam, and afterwards he accepted Austrigusa as a wife. Filiam Gippidorum, the daughter of the Gepids. So we can see here how Wacho is marrying with some of these allied tribes to forge peace agreements, essentially. Et habuit Wacho de Austrigusa filias duas. And Wacho had 2 daughters from Austrigusa. Nomen une Visigarda, the name of the first one was Visigarda, quam tradirit in matrimonium Theodeperti regis Francorum. So, whom he gave in marriage to Theudepert, the king of the Franks. Et nomen secunde Walderada, and the name of the second was Walderade, quam habuit uxorem Scuswald rex Francorum, whom King Suswald of the Franks had as a wife. So presumably this must have been after Theudepert had deceased. Quam odio habens tradit ideam Garibald in uxorem, and I love this so much, whom odio habens, so having her in hatred, so basically they had a terrible marriage. Scuswald tradit ideam handed her over Garibald to Garibald in uxorem as a wife. Now, unfortunately, we don't get to hear from Waldered's account of this. We don't get to hear her side of the story. I do find the idea of this king just not getting on with his wife, and like, you can go on and marry someone else now. I find that quite an amusing idea. Moving on. Filiam regis Herodordum tertium uxorem abuit nomen Silinga. De ipsa habuit filium nomine Valtari. Mortuus es Wacho, et regnavit filius ipsius Valtari annos septem. Farigedus ipsi omnes lethinges fuerunt. So, filiam regis Herodordum tertium uxorem abuit. So, this is Wacho. This is the third wife that Wacho had. And she was the daughter of the king of the heralds, filiam regis heraldorum, tertiam uxorem, as the third wife, nomen Sininja. And this is weird in terms of the grammar, because the grammar would imply that the name Silinga had the daughter as a third wife of the king of the heralds. Clearly what this is meant to be saying is, well, it could be nomine, so she was Silinga by name. That would be the simplest way to resolve this sentence. Or it could be that the daughter of the king of the heralds, Wacho's third wife, had the name of Silinga, in which case the cases would be different. But we've got this ending here at the end, filiam, tertiam, uxorem, and this could indicate a couple of things, among which being that if this filia and tertiam and uxorem was intended to be nominatives, this would suggest perhaps that the scribe is working from a recitation rather than copying from a written example, and the scribe is used to speaking a sort of early Romance language where the distinction between a and is declining or non-existent. So he's hyper-correcting by putting this am on the end there when actually it doesn't make sense in the sentence. So just bear in mind that the sentence is to a degree ungrammatical in Latin, but we get the meaning of it, that Wacho had the third wife of Wacho was the daughter of the king of the heralds, and her name was Silinga. De ipsa habuit filium nomine Waltari. So he had a son from her nomine Waltari by the name of Walter. Mordus est Wacho, et regnavit filius ipsis Waltari annos septem. So Wacho died, and his son Walter ruled for 7 years. Faragedus, presumably this is the name of the son, Faragade, is the omnes lethinges fuerunt. So all of these were Lethings, which is a sort of royal dynasty. So, et post Waltari regnavit Audwin, ipse aduxit Langobardos in Pannoniam, et regnavit Albuin filius ipsius post eum, qui mater est Radlenda, eo tempore pugnavit Albuin cum rege Gipidorum nomine Cunimund, et mortuus est Cunimund in ipsa pugna, et debellati sunt Gipidis. So, et post Waltari regnavit Audwin, and Audwin ruled after Walter. Ipse aduxit Langobardos in Pannoniam. This man led the Lombards into Pannonia. Et regnavit Albuin filius ipsius, and Albuin his son ruled post eum after him, qui mater est Rodlenda, whose mother is Rodland. Eo tempore pugnavit Albuin. At that time Albuin fought cum rege Gipidorum, with the king of the Gipids, nomine Cunimund, Cunimund by name. Et mortus est Cunimund, and Cunimund died in ipsa pugna, in that fight, et debellati sunt Gipidis, and the Gepids were defeated militarily. So, tulit Albuin uxorem Rosimundam filiam Cunimundi quae predaverat, quia iam mortua fuerat uxoripsius flutsvinda, quae fuit filia Flothardior regis Francorum, de qua abuit filiam nomine Albswindam. Et habitaverunt Langobardi in Pannonia annis quadraginta duo. So, tulit Albuin uxorem Rosimundam. Albuin took Rosimunda as a wife, filiam Cunimundi, the daughter of Cunimund, quae predaverat. Now this is an interesting one. So these things, quae predaverat, it could mean those things which he had taken. But if that were to be the case, we would need to have a dative for uxorem Rosimundam filiam. So what's a more likely interpretation is that Albuin took Rosamunda, the daughter of Cunimund, as, whom he had stolen, predaverat. But this is the wrong case. This would be the accusative neuter plural form of the Latin pronoun qui. But we would need it to be the feminine accusative form, which would be quam. So this is clear that the person writing this is really making some serious mistakes in their Latin grammar. Quia jam mortua fuerat uxor ipsius flutsvinda, because Albuin's wife Flutswinda had already died. Flutzinda quefuit filia Flotardio regis Francorum. Flutzinda, who had been the daughter, quefuit filia Flotardio regis Francorum, to King Flotharius, king of the Franks. De qua habuit filiam nomine Albswindam, from whom he had a daughter, de qua habuit filiam nomine Albswindam, Albswinth by name. Et habita verum Langobardi in Pannonia annis quadragenta dua. And the Lombards lived in Pannonia for 42 years. So, ipse albuin aduxit Langobardos in Italia, invitatus a narcete scribarum, et movit albuin rex Langobardorum de Pannonia, mense apellelis a Pascha indictione prima. Secunda vero indictione ceperunt predare in Italia. So, this Albuin led the Lombards into Italy, ipse Albuin adduxit Langobardos in Italia. Invitatus, so this invitatus is accusative masculine plural, as is Langobardos, so it's the same thing. So the Lombards who were invited are narcete scribarum by the general Narses. Et movit Albuin rex Langobardorum, and King Albuin of the Lombards moved de Pannonia, out of Pannonia, mense Aprilis, a Pascha indicione prima. Now this is kind of difficult. I'd sort of say it's like from during the first indication on Easter Day, perhaps, a Pascha. So he moved from Easter. Easter was celebrated during April, and he moved out of Pannonia from Easter Day during the first indiction. Secunda vero indictione ceperunt predare in Italia. During the second indiction, they started to plunder in Italy. Now, indictions are the sort of tax seasons of the Roman Empire, and they are every 15 years. So, within the first period of 15 years, which is they kept as a system of counting in the early Middle Ages, Albuin left Pannonia, and then by the time the second period had come about, he had begun to plunder within Italy. Tertia autem indictione factus est Dominus Italiae. Regnavit Albuin in Italia annos 3, et occisus est in Verona in palatio ab Hilmichis, et Rosamunda uxorde sua per consilium peritheo. Voluit regnare Hilmichis, et non potuit, quia volebant eum Langobardi occidere. So, tertia autem indictione factus est Dominus Italiae. So with the third indiction, factus est Dominus Italiae, he was made the Lord of Italy. So Albuin leads Lombards into Italy during the first indiction. In the second, they begin to plunder in Italy. And then 15 years after they move into Italy, or move out of Pannonia, I should say, Albuin is made the Lord of Italy. Regnavit Albuin in Italia annos 3. Albuin ruled in Italy for 3 years, et occisus est in Verona in palatio ab Hilmichis, et Rosamunda uxorde sua. So he was killed in Verona, in the palace, in palatio ab Hilmichis, by Hilmich, and Rosamund, his wife, per consilium peritheo, through the council of Perithæus, who's presumably a Byzantine. Voluit regnare Hilmichis. Hilmichis wanted to rule, et non potuit, and he was not able to, quia volebant eum Langobardi occidere, because the Lombards wanted to kill him. Tunc mandavet Rosamundam ad Longinum prefectum, ut eam recipere Ravenna. Mox ut audivit Longinus, gavisus est, misit navem Angarialem, et Toledo Rosamunda et Hilmichis, et Albswindam, filiam Albuin regis, et omnes thesauros Langobardorum secum duxerunt in Ravenna. So then this will be Hilmichis, he sent Rosamund ad Longinum to Longinus the prefect, ut eam reciperet Ravenna, so that Ravenna would accept her. Mox ut audivid Longinus, as soon as Longinus heard this, gavisus he rejoiced. Misit navem Angarialem, he sent a military ship, et tulerunt Rosamunda et Hilmichis et Albswindam, and they took Rosamund and Hilmichis and Albswind, filiam Albwin regis, et omnes thesauros Longobardorum se conducterunt in Ravenam. So Rosamund and Hilmich took this military ship, and they also took, and they also took, sorry for that, they also took Albswyn, the daughter of King Alboin, and all the treasure chests of the Lombards with them into Ravenna. So Rosamund and Hilmich go into Ravenna to start a government there. Tunc hortare cepit Longinus praefectus Rosamundam ut occideret Hilmichis et exet uxor Longini. Audito consilio ipsius temperavit venenum et post balneum dedit ei in caldo bibere. So, Tuncordare cepit Longinus praefectus Rosamundam is, then Longinus the prefect began to encourage Hordhare Rosamund, ut occideret Hilmichis, so that she would kill Hilmich, et esset uxor Longini, and that she would be the wife of Longinus. So Longinus is saying, kill your husband and be my wife instead. Audito consilio ipsius, with his advice having been heard, temperavit veneum, she prepared some poison, et post balneum dedite in caldo bibere. And after the bath, which is quite interesting, by the way, that these Germanic barbarians are still maintaining the practice of Roman bathing. So after he took a bath, Rosamund gave the poison to him in caldo, in a cup, so that he would drink it. By the way, this is actually kind of poor construction in Latin. A much better way would be to say bibendum, rather than bibere, which is the sort of infinitive. So again, another example of the poor Latinity. And this might even reflect more the style that a Lombard language original might have followed in terms of grammatical constructions. So, cumque bibisit Hilmichis intellexit quod malignum bibiset, precepit ut ipsa Rosamunda biberet in vita, et mortui sunt ambo. Dunc Longinus praefectus tulit thesauros Longobardorum et Albswindam filiam Albuin regis iusit ponere in navem et transmissit eam Constantinopolim ad imperatorem. So, cumque bibisit Hilmichis, when Hilmichis had drunk this, intellexit, he understood, quod malignum bibiset, that he had drunk something horrible. Precepit, he ordered, ut ipsa Rosamunda biberet in vita, that Rosamund herself should drink the same drink, in vita, like unwillingly, et mortui sunt ambo, and both of them died. Tunc Longinus praefectus tulit thesauros Longobardorum, then Longwin the prefect took the treasure chest of the Lombards, et Albswintham filiam Albuin regis, and Albswin, the daughter of King Albuin, usit ponere in navem. So he ordered the Lombards to put her in a ship, et transmissit eam Constantinopolim, and he sent her to Constantinople ad imperatorem, to the emperor. This was actually a common fate for the Germanic nobles, particularly those who had been defeated by the Byzantines, is that the nobles would be sent off to Constantinople to live a protected life as these sort of, I guess, royal guests in as extremely opulent city as Constantinople, so that the supporters that they still had left in their home countries would not seek revenge against the Byzantine authorities who remained within, say, Italy, where they had imposed military rule. So, what happens to the Lombards then? Religi Langobardi levaverunt sibi regem nomine clef de Beleos, et regnavit clef annos duos, et mortus est, et judicaverunt duces Langobardorum annos duodecim. Post ec levaverunt sibi regem nomine Autarine, filium Clafoni, et accepit Autarvi uxorem deudolendam, filium Gardepald et Walderade de Beovaria. So, reliqui Langobardi levaverunt sibi regem, so the remaining Lombards raised for themselves a king, nomine Clef de Beleos, called Clef of Beleos, et regnavit Clef annos duos, and Clef ruled for 2 years, et mortus est, and he died. Et judicaverunt duces Langobardorum annos duodecim. And the leaders of the Lombard ruled for 12 years. Post ec levaverunt sibi regem nomine Autarine. After these, they raised for themselves a king by the name of Auterin, filium Clafoni. He was the son of Clafo. Et accepit Autarvi uxorem Theodolendam. And Authari accepted as a wife Theodolenda, filium Gardipald et Walderade de Bavaria, the daughter of King Garipald and Walderad of Bavaria. Et venit cum Theodolenda frater Ripsius nomine Gundobald, et ordinavit eum Autardi rex ducem in civitatem Mastense, et regnavit Autardi annos septem. So, and frater Ripsius, and her brother, nomine Gundobald, called Gundobald, came cum Theodolenda, with Theodolenda, et ordinavit eum Autardi rex ducem, and King Autari ordained him to be a leader, a military leader, in Civitatem Astense, in the city of Astens. Et regnavit Autari annos septem, and Authari ruled for 7 years. Et exhibit aqueducts Turingus de Taurinis, et iunctit se Theodolenda regine, et factus et rex Langobardorum, et occidit duces reveles suos, Zangrolf de Verona, Mimulf de insula Sancti Juliani, et Zedulf de Pergamum, et alios qui reveles verunt, et genuit aqua de Theodolenda filiam nomine Gunpergam. So, et exhibit aqueducts Turingus de Taurinis, and Aquo, the Thuringian leader, departed de Tarinis out of Tharinis, I don't know exactly where that is, et iunctit se Theodolinda regine, and he joined himself, so he married Theodolinda the queen, et factus es rex Langobardorum, and he became, or he was made, king of the Lombards. Et occidit duces rebeles suos, Zangrolf de Verona, and he killed his rebelling dukes, Zangrolf of Verona, Mimulf de insula Sancti Juliani, Mimulf from the island of St. Julian, et Gedulf de Bergamum, and Gedulf from Bergamum. I quite like the name Zangrolf, by the way, it's just really cool to me. Et alios qui rebeles verunt, and he killed off other dukes who had been rebels. In rebellion, let's say. Et genuit aqua de Theodolenda, and aqua spawned from Theodolenda filiam nomine Gunpergam, a daughter called Gunperga. So, et regnavit aqua annos sex, et post ipsum regnavit Ardoal annos duodecim, et post ipsum regnavit Rotarvi ex genere Ardodus, et rupit civitatem vel castra Romanorum, que fuerunt circa litera apriso lune, usque in terra Francorum, quam vitergium ad partem orienti, et pugnavit circa fluvium Scultenna, et ceciderunt a parte Romanorum 8 numerus. So, et regnavit aqua annos sex, aqua ruled for 6 years, et post ipsum regnavit Aral annos duodecim, and Arawil ruled for 12 years after him, et post ipsum regnavit Rotharvi ex genere Arodus, and Rothar from the tribe of Arod ruled after him, et rupit civitatem vel castra Romanorum, and he plundered the city or camps of the Romans, que fueron circa litera, which were around the shore, apriso lune, with the rising of the moon, usque in terra Francorum, all the way into the land of the Franks, quam ubitergium ad partem orienti, the sort of I guess, rear part of that land, which was facing towards the east. The Latin here is quite jarbled and confusing, and it's difficult to follow along, so don't take this as a good example of how to compose your own Latin, by the way. Et pugnavet circa fluvium Scultena, and King Rothar fought by the river Sculten, et ceciderunt ab parte Romanorum, and on the part of the Romans, and these are going to be the Byzantines, of course, octo milia numerus, so the number of 8,000 soldiers fell, which is quite an unlikely tally. This is like myth-making, really. This is building up the reputation of the Lombards. Et regnavit Rothari annos 10 et septem, et post ipsum regnavit Aripert annos 9, et post ipsum regnavit Grimoald, eo tempore exivit Constantinus imperator de Constantinopolim, et venit in partes Campaniae, et regressus est in Siciliam, et occisus est a suis. Et regnavit Grimoald annos 9, et post regnavit Berthari. So, Rothar ruled for 10 years, and 7, so for 17 years, et post ipsum regnavit Aripert annos 9, and Aripert ruled for 9 years after him, et post ipsum regnavit Grimoald, and Grimoald ruled after him, eo tempore exivit Constantinus imperator. At that time Emperor Constantine departed de Constantinopolim out of Constantinople, et venit in partes Campaniae, and he came into the regions of Campania, et regressus est in Siciliam, and he returned to Sicily, et occisus est a suis, he was killed by his own people. This is Emperor Constantine. Et regnavit Grimoald annos 9, and Grimoald ruled for 9 years, et post regnavit Berthari. So, and after him, presumably the ipsum is left out here, after him Bertha ruled. And there we go. We have finally gone all the way to the end of the origin of the Lombards. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know after the first chapter it's fairly pedestrian stuff, but nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want me to teach you Latin or any of the other languages that we do here in this channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon, which will be linked in the description of this video. I tend to post these Latin lessons in my server before I make videos out of them, so you'll get early access to those. It's also a fun community of like-minded people who share memes, and we sometimes do movie nights together, so you should come and check us out. If you want private tuition from me in Latin or any of the other languages, you can subscribe to my Patreon, which will also be linked in the description of this video. So until next time, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye everyone!